Hello, my name is Brent Hargreaves. This video is the second of three advancing a hypothesis to explain why the civilizations of the Eastern Mediterranean suffered great damage around the year 1200 BC. We hypothesize that the disappearance of the Hittite Empire, not forgetting that this civilization was on a par with the Egyptian Empire, was due to a solar storm of rare ferocity which irradiated them. This may have killed people directly, or destroyed their reproductive capability, or may have destroyed their agriculture and food stores. In this video, you will see two independent archaeological puzzles which can be explained by an intense burst of radiation in the form of high-speed neutrons and muons. When cosmic rays from our sun or from elsewhere reach the Earth, they collide with atoms in the atmosphere, and on occasion, they or their byproducts make it all the way down to the ground. These impacts create new atoms, known as cosmogenic radionuclides. The more familiar word isotope has a similar meaning to nuclide, but is not quite the same. The nuclide most familiar to the layman is carbon-14, which is created by cosmic rays smashing into nitrogen atoms in the atmosphere. Without those collisions, there would be no carbon-14. Having been thus created, carbon-14 atoms then slowly disappear by the process of radioactive decay at a steady and regular pace. Half of them decay over a certain period of time, the famous half-life. This works like a natural clock, the regular swinging pendulum of carbon dating. Carbon dating depends on that carbon being ingested by plant life, such as trees taking in carbon dioxide gas whilst alive. In addition to carbon-14, there are other radionuclides. Whilst radiocarbon is created in the atmosphere, cosmic rays can also burrow into the Earth's surface, making equivalent nuclear changes in rocks. One such nuclide is chlorine-36. This time the result of cosmic ray collisions with calcium-40, one of the constituents of limestone. When our sun is quiet for long periods, the surface of rocks such as limestone are being transformed by a steady stream of galactic cosmic rays. These are passing imperceptibly through our bodies all the time. Neutron monitors detect these all day, every day, and the effect on the ground underneath our feet can be measured by geologists. This effect is greater at the surface than lower down. And with a little thought, we can see why this is so. The upper layers, which intercept some of these particles, are partially screening the lower ones, and the deeper we look, the fewer particles have made it down there. So regular is this soft rain, which bathes us daily, that geologists can set their clock by it. A block of limestone of 1 mole size, weighing 56 grams, dug out of the depths of a quarry and placed on the surface, will have 3,000 of its calcium atoms transmuted into chlorine every year by galactic cosmic rays. The geologist can thus state with great confidence its exposure time. 6,000 chlorine atoms, that's 2 years. 30,000, you get the picture. Unlike the biologists and archaeologists with their declining score of carbon-14, the geologist's dating tool, chlorine-36, is a rising score. But in both cases, a steadily ticking clock yields the age of an event. Let's now take a look at this in practice. When the team of geologists led by Dr. Naki Akjar of the University of Bern examined the Hattusha limestone platform levelled by the Hittites in order to build their walled acropolis, they expected to find that it had been exposed for somewhere between 3,200 and 3,700 years, corresponding to 1200 BC to 1700 BC. But their results were surprising. The cosmogenic chlorine-36 measured in the limestone platform had 20,000 years of exposure. The blocks making up the circuit wall came out at variously 21,000 years old and 52,000 years. A big surprise. Dr. Akjar's team concluded that this material must have had millennia of prior exposure. But by adopting the Armageddon hypothesis, an alternative explanation emerges. We will clarify this remark shortly, but first let us consider another dating anomaly, this time vegetable instead of mineral. In 1999, a team of archaeologists led by Jürgen Seeher of the German Archaeological Institute of Istanbul made a stunning discovery. Hattusha had within its walls 32 enormous grain silos, and half of them still contained the grain. In the words of a 2017 paper by Dr. Charlotte Diffie et al., quote, "The silo could have held around 7,000 to 9,000 cubic meters of cereal grain, enough food to feed 20,000 to 30,000 people for a year. The hermetically sealed silos contained hundreds of tons of barley and wheat, perfectly preserved for over 3,000 years, albeit carbonized in these silos, 2 meters deep. They had been charred, but strangely not reduced to ash. So well preserved were these grains that a great deal has been revealed about the Hittites' taxation regime, the vast areas cultivated, the types of crop, and even the seeds of weeds among the grain. This was seen to be the perfect organic material for accurate carbon-14 dating. However, as with the geology counterpart, an anomalous age emerged. In the words of Dr. Diffie, radiocarbon dating of the cereal grains indicates that the burning event itself occurred during the early 16th century BC, and that this resulted in the destruction of 12 of the 32 storage chambers. But Hattusha was abandoned in the early 12th century BC. Surely the grains, a precious strategic reserve, would not have sat untouched for 400 years whilst people went about their business. By adopting the Armageddon Hypothesis, this 400-year anomaly can be explained, as can the aforementioned rocks, which appear thousands of years older than they can be. In both cases, we submit, the radioactive clock has been disrupted by an exceptional and intense burst of solar radiation. This graph shows in a purely schematic form the principle. In the case of the carbonized grain, energetic neutrons and muons collided with the nitrogen which exists in all grains, thereby inflating the quantity of carbon-14, thereby exaggerating the grain's apparent age by 400 years. In the case of the limestone, the same energetic particles collided with calcium-40, thereby inflating the quantity of chlorine-36, thereby inflating the apparent age by thousands of years. A thought occurs at this point. Might it be that the charring of the grains is as a result not of a nearby fire, but instead due to the murderous radiation which, by this hypothesis, wiped out the owners of that vast strategic reserve? Before moving on to the hypothesized solar storm, which destroyed Hatti, the Hittite Empire, let's just take a quick look at the scale of what disappeared. From written king lists, we know of Hittite kings from Hattusili I, who reigned around 1650 BC, right down to Suppiluliuma II, their final king, over 400 years later. Their surviving literature is mainly in the form of clay tablets and carved stone, with one sensational example of a bronze tablet found hidden under paving slabs at Hattusha. Who can say what perishable documents, less robust than stone or bronze, there may have been? Hatti and Egypt would occasionally come to blows, and the Battle of Kadesh in 1269 BC between these two mighty empires has been documented in astonishing detail. We know about the tactics and formations employed at this clash, which occurred in modern-day Lebanon on the river Orontes. It was clearly a draw, even though Ramses II, who commanded the Egyptian army, recorded it as a win for his side. The result was a peace treaty, the first in recorded history, and it is thrilling to note the Egypt copy is on display on the wall of the Karnak temple in the Egyptian capital Luxor, written of course in hieroglyphics, whilst the Hittite version, written in Hittite cuneiform, can be seen in Istanbul Archaeology Museum. Our purpose here is to describe some of the recent leaps of understanding in astrophysics, the demonstrable effects of our unquiet sun on the surface of our home planet, and the evidence supporting the premise that the Hittites fell victim to a national disaster on a scale vastly greater than, say, any tsunami or volcanic destruction of Pompeii. But in presenting the dry technicalities and the logical sequence of cause and effect, It's worth remembering that the men, women and children of Hatti would have been going about their daily business, some on a modest, humble scale, and some with grander ideas and ambitions, probably in the expectation of a bright future, only for it all to be snuffed out by an unimaginably cruel fate. How does a solar storm strike the Earth's surface? Without wishing to be pedantic, we must here use scientific terms with due precision. Solar storms can be divided into 4 categories with increasing severity. A solar flare is an eruption at the Sun's surface which may be limited to merely a burst of electromagnetic radiation or may develop into one in which matter is propelled outwards above escape velocity, never to return. The second level is a coronal mass ejection, in which tons of charged particles escape from the Sun's pull and head off into the solar system and beyond. This may happen in any direction, including away from the Earth, or could be considered a near miss. The third category of solar storm, when matter comes our way, is classed a solar proton event. This is a weekly occurrence which results in a northern lights display or its southern equivalent. These protons may penetrate the Earth's magnetic shield and become hazardous to orbiting spacecraft and to any human occupant, but they do not make it to the Earth's surface. Roughly once a year, charged particles pierce our magnetic and atmospheric defences and make it to the ground. This fourth category is termed a ground-level event. Since the 1940s, there has been created a network of detectors on the Earth's surface to measure the flow of neutrons and other particles which reach the surface. The matter ejected from the Sun we call primary solar cosmic rays. They consist of protons and alpha particles, which happen to be hydrogen and helium nuclei respectively. They get no closer than 20 kilometers to the surface due to our atmospheric shield. However, like the baton passing in an athletics relay race, these collisions create showers of fast-moving and fast-changing secondary particles, which continue the downward journey. Some make it to the surface. These are mainly neutrons and negative muons. In our third video on this subject, we shall show that the Sun has a track record, erupting on a much greater scale than the 1859 Carrington event. It did so in 660 BC, 774 AD, and 992 AD, which is evidenced by ice cores and tree ring data. We shall look at the known effects of radiation on people and attempt to estimate the doses suffered by the Hittites. And we shall make a first estimate of the direction from which the deadly beam of cosmic rays descended onto the good people of Hatti. This in the hope that scholars will be encouraged to return to Hattusha to build on the fine work they have already done.